Sir, this boy, he lived with me in the orphanage. The room froze. The silver tray in the maid's trembling hands clattered against the marble floor, echoing through the billionaire's mansion like a gunshot. A tall, elegant man in his early 50s, crisp charcoal suit, sharp blue eyes, slowly turned around. His expression, usually unreadable, cracked. His breath hitched. What did you just say?" he whispered. Standing near the doorway was a young black woman, barely 24. Her uniform was simple, her curls tucked neatly under a cap. But her gaze, steady, fearless, and glimmering with emotion, didn't waver. "I said," she repeated softly, "he lived with me. In the orphanage. The same one your charity never visited." The boy she pointed to, a quiet, frail child of around 10, clutched a ragged teddy bear and looked up at the billionaire with wide, uncertain eyes. Everyone in the room, the guards, the assistant, even the head maid, and stared in disbelief. The child's face, it looked eerily familiar. The billionaire's hand twitched. His throat tightened. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The young woman took a small step forward. "You said this boy had no records, no name, no family." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "But I remember him. I used to share my food with him." "You can't hide where he came from. Not anymore." For a long, heavy second, no one moved. Then the billionaire's pale face turned away, as if the truth after all these years had finally found him, and deep down, he knew. This wasn't the first time he had seen that boy's eyes. The silence in the room hung like smoke. The billionaire Richard Harlan stood motionless beside his glass desk. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows, cutting sharp lines across the marble floor and across his trembling hands. The young maid, Maya, kept her gaze fixed on him. Every muscle in her body told her to step back, to apologize, to swallow her words, but she didn't. Something inside her refused. The boy, Samuel, stood quietly between them, clutching his worn-out teddy bear like a shield. His big brown eyes darted from Maya to Richard, unsure which one to trust. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low and uneven. "You're mistaken," he said. "That boy was found abandoned near a shelter downtown. My foundation took him in. You must be confused." Maya took a slow step forward, her voice steady. "No, sir. I remember him. His name was Samuel." "The orphanage in Brookdale. I used to feed him when the others wouldn't. He was always quiet, but he'd hum that little song before bed." Richard's fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. The name, the song, both too specific to be coincidence. He turned away, pretending to straighten his tie, though his mind raced. How could she know that? He thought. That place was long buried. His assistant, Clara, a sharp woman in her 40s with icy composure, stepped in, trying to diffuse the tension. "Maya, maybe you should go finish your duties. Mr. Harlan has an important meeting." But Maya didn't move. Her voice softened. "You said he had no family. I just want to understand why." Clara frowned. "That's not your place to ask questions." Richard raised a hand. "Enough!" The word cracked through the air like a whip. Samuel flinched. The boy pressed closer to Maya, hiding behind her apron. Richard's chest rose and fell as he steadied himself. His face was pale, but his voice carried authority again. "Take the child to the playroom. I'll handle this." Two guards hesitated, then gently led Samuel away. Maya's eyes followed him until he disappeared around the corner. When the door closed, the room felt colder. Richard turned slowly to her. "Tell me," he said, voice low. "Who sent you here?" "No one," Maya said quickly. "I've been working here for 8 months. My mother has been your housemaid for years." Richard's jaw tightened. "Then why bring this up now?" "Because I saw the picture in your study," Maya said, her voice shaking. "The one with the orphanage fire. I recognized the building. And when Samuel came here last week, I recognized him." Richard's face darkened. "That orphanage was shut down 20 years ago." "You couldn't possibly—" "I was a child there," she interrupted. "So were you." His heart seemed to stop. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Richard stared at her, disbelief turning slowly into dread. You're saying—" "Yes," she said softly. "You were one of us. You were the oldest boy. You used to protect the younger ones. Until the night the place burned down." Richard stumbled back a step, the blood draining from his face. He had spent years burying that memory, the screaming, the smoke, the sound of wood collapsing, and the small hands he couldn't save. His entire empire had been built on erasing that past, on becoming someone else. But she had found it, Maya's voice softened. I didn't mean to hurt you, sir. I needed to know. Why take in Samuel? Why pretend he's just another case from your charity? Richard didn't answer. His mind raced with flashes. A tiny boy with the same brown eyes clutching a toy bear, crying for help while he ran toward the door. He had told himself he'd forget. That survival meant forgetting. Now the past stood in front of him in a maid's uniform. He walked slowly toward the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. You don't understand what that place was, he said quietly. No one would believe me if I told them. Then tell me, she whispered. He turned sharply. You wouldn't want to hear it, but Maya didn't look away. I do. Their eyes met, one filled with guilt, the other with compassion. At that moment the door burst open. Clara returned, phone in hand, looking tense. Sir, the press just called. They found documents about your orphanage donations and the missing children reports. Richard's face went white. What? She handed him the phone. They said they'll publish tonight. Maya froze. Her heart pounded. The timing. It couldn't be coincidence. Richard's hands shook as he read the message on the screen. Headlines waiting to explode. Accusations buried for decades. For the first time his voice broke. It's all happening again. Maya took a cautious step closer. Sir, maybe this is your chance to tell the truth. To save him. He looked up, eyes glistening with something between fear and realization. You don't know what truth costs, Maya, he said. You think the world forgives a man who crawled out of fire and built his fortune from ashes? They'll destroy everything. She held his gaze. Maybe what's left to destroy is what's keeping you guilty. The clock ticked again, each second echoing like a countdown. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, shaking the tall glass windows. Richard turned toward the rain-darkened skyline. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man cornered by his own past, and Maya, standing quietly behind him, realized this was just the beginning. The storm outside grew heavier, the sound of rain tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. Inside, the mansion felt colder than ever. Richard didn't move from the window. His reflection stared back at him, older, paler, and haunted. His empire, his image, everything he'd built to bury his past, was about to unravel. Maya stood behind him, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Every second stretched into eternity. Finally, Richard turned around. You said the boy lived with you, he said slowly. How much do you remember about that place? Maya hesitated. Everything, her voice trembled. The smell of smoke, the cracked windows, the nights we'd shiver because the heaters never worked. The way the caretaker used to lock us in the basement when donors visited. Richard's expression hardened, but there was pain behind it. Don't. I remember you too, she said quietly. You were older, maybe 13. You used to sneak us pieces of bread. You'd tell stories to keep us calm when the power went out. Richard closed his eyes. He could almost hear the whispers of his younger self, promising the others that someday he'd come back for them. He never did. Maya took a step closer. What really happened the night of the fire? His eyes opened. For a moment, his carefully built walls crumbled. There was no accident, he said, voice low and raw. It was set on purpose. The orphanage was a front for money laundering and charity fraud. They burned it to erase the evidence. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Who? The same people who funded my scholarship, he said bitterly. They needed a survivor who'd keep quiet, and they chose me. The room seemed to shrink around them. Maya whispered, You were just a child. Richard laughed, cold and broken. And they made sure I never forgot it. He walked toward his desk and opened a hidden drawer. Inside were old faded photos. Children lined up in grey uniforms, faces smudged, eyes hollow. Maya leaned in, her heart pounding. That's me, she whispered, pointing at a little girl with 2 short braids. And him, Richard said softly, tapping another face. A small boy with the same brown eyes as Samuel. Maya's breath caught. So he is from there, Richard nodded. He's the last one left. I've been looking for him for years. Why? She asked, his voice dropped. Because I thought saving one of us might save me. Thunder cracked outside. shaking the chandelier above them. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself carried the weight of buried sins. Maya took a deep breath. "Then tell the truth, sir. If people know what happened, they'll understand." He looked at her sharply. "Understand? Maya, the moment I open my mouth, they'll dig up everything. Every bribe, every deal. They'll turn me into the villain who used tragedy to climb to the top. But you didn't set the fire," she said. "No," he replied bitterly. "I just watched it burn and never looked back." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The rain eased into a steady drizzle. Then footsteps echoed down the marble hall. Clara appeared again, her phone pressed to her ear, face tight. "Richard, it's worse. The reporters aren't just asking about the orphanage. They found the adoption records. Samuel's name is on the list. They're saying he's your son." Maya's eyes widened. "What?" Richard froze. "That's impossible." Clara dropped the phone on his desk. "They have documents. Birth certificates, guardianship papers, all pointing to you as the listed guardian under a false name." Richard grabbed the papers, his hands shaking. "I didn't sign these," he said. "Someone forged them." Clara leaned closer, her tone low. "Or someone wants you to confess." Maya's mind raced. "Who would do that?" Richard's face darkened. "Someone who knows the truth about the fire. Someone who was supposed to die that night." He sank into his chair, staring blankly at the papers. Maya stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Sir, maybe it's time to stop hiding. Whoever did this wants you to remember. Maybe Samuel isn't here by accident." He looked up at her, eyes hollow, yet something fragile flickered inside them. Before he could respond, Samuel appeared at the doorway, holding the same teddy bear. His tiny voice broke the tension. "Mr. Harlan," he said softly, "the lady said you're sad. Are you?" Richard froze. For a second, the billionaire vanished, and the boy from the orphanage returned. He knelt down. "I used to have a bear just like that." Samuel smiled faintly. "This one's from my old home. It smells like smoke sometimes." Maya felt tears sting her eyes. Richard's gaze softened. "I remember that smell too." The boy looked confused. "Did you live there too?" Richard didn't answer. He just reached out, his hand hovering over the child's shoulder. The weight of every lie pressed down on him. Maya watched silently. The man who once ruled boardrooms and governments couldn't even meet a child's eyes. Clara stepped in, her voice brisk. "Reporters will be here in less than an hour. We need a statement." Richard stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "Prepare the main hall. I'll speak to them." Maya's eyes widened. "Sir, what are you going to say?" He turned toward her, his voice calm, too calm. "I'm going to give them what they want. The truth." But there was something else in his tone, something final. As he walked toward the door, lightning flashed through the windows, throwing his shadow long across the marble floor. Maya's heart pounded. She had no idea that by the end of the night, the truth Richard was about to reveal would change all of their lives. Forever. The mansion's main hall was unrecognizable. Reporters filled the marble floor, cameras flashing, microphones pointing toward the raised platform where Richard Harlan was about to speak. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing like a warning. Clara moved through the crowd with practiced authority, whispering instructions to the security guards. "No questions until he's done," she said firmly. Her eyes, however, betrayed anxiety. In the corner, Maya stood beside Samuel. The little boy's hand gripped hers tightly. His teddy bear dangled from the other, its stitched eye glinting under the camera lights. She looked up at Richard. He stood tall, expression composed, wearing a charcoal grey suit that reflected the glow of the chandeliers. But his eyes, they weren't the cold, calculating eyes of the billionaire everyone knew. They were haunted. As the noise quieted, Richard stepped up to the microphone. He took a slow breath. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I know there are questions about my foundation, my past, and this boy," the crowd murmured, flashes popping like lightning. Richard's voice trembled just slightly. "You've all seen the reports. Yes, I grew up in an orphanage, the Brookdale Home for Children. It was not a charity. It was a business built on exploitation. And yes, there was a fire." The murmuring grew louder. Clara's hand twitched nervously. Richard continued, "I was 13 when it happened. I was told to leave that night by a man who promised to protect me. Instead, he destroyed everything. He took the records, the funds, and vanished, leaving dozens of children dead. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maya felt her throat tighten. She had heard pieces of the story before, whispered in the dark corners of the orphanage, but never like this. Richard looked down at his trembling hands. For years, I tried to bury it. I built this company to prove I could be someone else. But every success reminded me of what I'd lost, who I'd left behind. He paused, his gaze moving toward Samuel. Until this boy appeared, the cameras turned toward the child. The boy shrank back slightly, clutching Maya's hand. Richard's voice softened. He reminded me of myself. The same eyes, the same silence. I thought if I could save him, I could rewrite what I failed to do that night. A reporter called out, "Mr. Harlan, is it true this child is your son?" The question hit like thunder. Richard hesitated, too long. Maya's eyes widened. Clara looked ready to intervene, but Richard lifted a hand. "No," he said firmly. "He's not my son, but he is my responsibility." He turned toward Maya. "And so is she." Every camera turned. The young maid froze, the attention burning into her. "This woman," Richard continued, "was a child at that same orphanage. She remembered what I wanted to forget. And she's the reason I'm standing here now." The room erupted with noise. Questions flew in every direction. Clara tried to step in, but Richard raised his voice above the chaos. "You want headlines? Here's one. The people who funded that orphanage still exist. They built their fortunes on the backs of children, including me, including her. And I will expose every one of them." The crowd exploded. Reporters shouted over each other, microphones thrust forward. Richard stepped back from the podium, breathing hard. His tie was loosened, his composure cracking. Maya's heart pounded. She had never seen a man destroy his empire with a single speech. As security escorted the press out, Clara approached him, furious. "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed. "They'll tear you apart." "I know," he said quietly, "but maybe that's the only way to make it right." When the last reporter left, the hall fell silent again. Maya walked up to him slowly. "That was brave," she said softly. He gave a tired smile. "No, it was necessary." Then Samuel tugged at Richard's sleeve. "Mr. Harlan," he said shyly, "do you remember a song from the old home?" Richard frowned. "What song?" The boy hummed, just a few quiet notes. It was the same lullaby. The same one the children used to sing in the dark when the fire alarms went off. Richard's face went white. "Where did you learn that?" "From my mom," Samuel said. "She said a big brother used to sing it to everyone before the lights went out." Maya's breath caught. "Your mom?" Samuel nodded. "She said he promised to come back." She waited for him. Richard stumbled back a step. The air felt thinner, heavier. "What was her name?" he whispered. The boy tilted his head. "Eleanor." The name hit him like lightning. Eleanor, the girl who'd pulled him out of the fire. The one he never saw again. The one he thought had died saving him. Maya's voice shook. "She was your sister, wasn't she?" Richard didn't answer. His eyes glistened as memories flooded back. Her laughter, her soot-covered face. The last word she screamed before the roof fell in. "I never found her body," he murmured. "I thought—" He couldn't finish. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Then Samuel is her son." He looked at the boy again, really looked at him, and for the first time saw her in his eyes. The truth settled between them. Heavy but freeing, Clara's voice broke the silence. "Richard, we need to get you out of here. The board's already calling. They want your resignation." He didn't even look at her. His attention stayed on Samuel. "I'm not leaving," he said quietly. "Not until this is finished." Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned toward her. "There's someone else I need to confront, the man who burned that place down." Her heart skipped a beat. "He's still alive?" Richard nodded slowly. "And I know where to find him." Lightning flashed outside, throwing shadows across his face. The billionaire's mask was gone. In its place stood a man who had finally stopped running from his past. Maya looked at him, her voice trembling. "Then I'm coming with you." He didn't argue. He just gave her a faint, grateful nod. And as they walked out of the mansion, Samuel's small hand holding hers, the storm above finally broke. Rain pouring down in sheets as if the heavens themselves were washing away the lies that had buried them all for decades. But neither of them knew. The man they were going to find already knew they were coming. Rain poured like a curtain of silver over the city. The streets shimmered under the glow of passing headlights, and thunder rolled across the skyline. Richard's black car sliced through the downpour, its wipers struggling to keep up. Inside, silence hung thick. Maya sat in the passenger seat, clutching Samuel's small backpack on her lap, the only thing they'd brought. She finally broke the silence. "Do you really know where he is?" Richard's jaw tightened. "He never disappeared. He just changed his name, just like I did." Maya frowned. "Who is he?" Richard's voice was low, steady. "His real name was Gregory Shaw, the orphanage director. After the fire, he moved overseas, changed his identity, and came back years later as one of my investors." Maya's eyes widened. "He's in your company?" He nodded grimly. "He built his empire on the ashes of ours." The car turned onto a narrow road lined with tall pines, leading to an abandoned estate on the outskirts of the city, a place that looked frozen in time. The old iron gates creaked open as Richard drove through. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the crumbling building at the top of the hill. "This is where he hides," Richard said. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of burnt wood. Faded portraits lined the walls, faces long forgotten, watching them from the dark. Samuel stayed close to Maya, holding her hand. His teddy bear's stitched smile looked oddly solemn in the dim light. Richard led them through the grand hallway until they reached a massive wooden door. He pushed it open, and there he was. An older man stood by the fireplace, silver hair slicked back, wearing a black suit that seemed almost too perfect for the decaying room. His piercing grey eyes lifted calmly as they entered. "Richard," the man said, voice smooth as ever. "You finally came home." Richard's voice was ice. "Don't call it that." Gregory smiled faintly. "You've done well for yourself. I always knew you would." "Because you made me believe I had to survive," Richard shot back. "You told me the fire was an accident. You told me Elena was gone." The man's smirk didn't waver. "And you believed me, because it was easier than facing the truth." Maya stepped forward, her tone sharp. "You killed those children. You stole their records, their lives, for money." Gregory's eyes flicked to her. "Ah, the maid's daughter. I remember your mother. She was stubborn too." Her fists clenched. "Don't talk about her." The older man turned his gaze back to Richard. "You could have stayed ignorant, Richard, lived in comfort, but you brought the ghosts back." Richard's eyes darkened. "Those ghosts deserve justice." Gregory chuckled softly, picking up a folder from the desk. "Justice? Or redemption? Tell me, what do you want more?" He tossed the folder at Richard's feet. Photographs spilled out, children's faces, documents stamped Brookdale Orphanage, and one burnt ledger with Richard's name on it. Maya knelt down, flipping through the pages. Her voice shook. "What is this?" Gregory's smile faded slightly. "The truth. Richard wasn't just one of the orphans, he was part of the program." Richard froze. "What are you talking about?" Gregory stepped closer, the firelight flickering against his pale face. "You think you were just another child there? No. You were the prototype. The investors wanted to raise orphans into perfect heirs, emotionless, brilliant, obedient. You were their success story." Maya's breath caught. "That's why he funded the orphanage, to build children like him." Richard shook his head slowly, backing away. "You're lying." But deep down, something in him knew. The discipline, the tests, the way they'd been ranked like products. It all made sense now. Gregory smiled coldly. "You're their legacy, Richard. And you've done exactly what they hoped. Built a fortune big enough for them to control again." The fire crackled. Rain battered the windows. Maya stepped between them. "You can't control him anymore." Gregory tilted his head. "Can't I? Look at him. He's still fighting for approval, from the world, from himself." Richard's voice broke. "You destroyed my sister. You destroyed everything good about me." The older man's expression softened slightly. "I gave you purpose." And then, a single flash of thunder, followed by a loud bang. The front door burst open. A squad of men in suits stormed in, armed, faces expressionless. Clara stood behind them. Maya gasped. "Clara, what are you doing?" Clara's voice was calm. "I warned you, Richard. You should have left it alone. Gregory smirked. My dear Clara has been my eyes and ears for years. Who do you think kept your company afloat while you played the hero? Richard's world spun. You were working for him? Clara's eyes softened, just for a second. You were never supposed to find out. Gregory's tone was final. End this. But before the guards could move, Samuel stepped forward, trembling but brave. He lifted his teddy bear, clutching it to his chest. Stop, he cried. He's not bad anymore. The room froze. Richard's heart shattered at the sight. Gregory blinked, almost amused. Children, he muttered, always the weak link. But that moment, that small hesitation, was all Richard needed. He grabbed Maya's arm and whispered, Run. She didn't hesitate. She pulled Samuel close and darted toward the back hallway. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the mansion as smoke filled the air. Richard turned back once, saw Clara's face pale and torn between duty and guilt, before the smoke swallowed everything. Outside, rain poured harder, drenching them as they stumbled toward the car. Maya's voice shook. Richard, what now? He looked back at the burning estate, his face set in stone. Now, he said, we expose everything. The company, the investors, Gregory, all of it. She nodded, breathless. And if they come after you, he gave a faint, tired smile, then they'll have to burn me down again. The camera would fade out there, thunder rolling in the distance, the fire reflecting in the puddles, the truth finally ignited. The night air smelled of smoke and rain. Fire trucks surrounded the hilltop mansion, their sirens echoing into the distance. The building that once held their darkest memories now burned in orange fury. And with it, the man who had built an empire on children's pain. Richard stood a few yards away, soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to him. Maya stood beside him, holding Samuel close under her coat. Her face glowed in the firelight, equal parts fear and relief. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Richard heard none of it. All he could see was the burning window, the same pattern of flames he'd seen as a boy, the same haunting light. For years, he thought he was running from that night. Now he understood. He'd been running toward it all along. A hand touched his arm. Maya's voice trembled softly. It's over, Richard. He looked at her, really looked, for the first time without guilt clouding his gaze. No, he said quietly. It's not over. Not until the truth is out. A few days later. Richard sat in his penthouse office, now stripped of the cold perfection that once defined it. Papers covered his desk, orphanage ledgers, adoption records, investment files. Maya worked beside him, combing through evidence, her eyes fierce and focused. Across from them, Samuel sat on the floor drawing with crayons. He was humming softly, the same lullaby the orphans used to sing to calm themselves during storms. Richard paused, watching him. That song, my sister used to hum that. Maya glanced up. Maybe he remembers her. Richard frowned. But how could he? Her expression softened. Maybe memories find their way to the right people, even if they're not supposed to. Before he could respond, the intercom buzzed. Sir, there's someone here to see you. Richard exchanged a glance with Maya. Who? The voice on the line hesitated. She says her name is Clara Shaw. Maya stiffened. Richard's hand froze mid-air. He rose slowly, motioning for Maya to stay with Samuel, and walked toward the lobby. Clara stood there pale and exhausted, her once perfect posture gone. Her arm was bandaged, her eyes heavy with regret. You survived, Richard said quietly. She nodded weakly. Gregory didn't. The police found what was left of him. Richard's jaw clenched. You came here to finish what he started? No. Her voice cracked. I came to end it for good. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. These are his backups, recordings, documents, everything. He recorded every deal, every transaction, every lie. It'll take them all down. Richard stared at it. Why give this to me? Clara met his eyes, the mask gone. Because I was one of them, one of the children in that program. I remember the fire, Richard. I remember you, he blinked. That's impossible. You weren't there that night. Her voice trembled. I was. You just don't remember because they made you forget. She took a deep breath. Gregory didn't start that fire. You did. The words hung in the air like lightning. Richard's heart stopped. What? Clara's eyes filled with tears. You tried to save your sister. You broke into the storage room, the one with the old wiring and gas heater. When it exploded, Gregory pulled you out, but he let everyone think it was an accident. He erased your memory and rebuilt you. Richard stumbled back, the room spinning. No, that can't be true. Clara's voice broke. He used your guilt as fuel. You built everything trying to fill a hole he created, a hole he knew you'd never escape. Maya's voice came from behind them. Richard. She had heard everything. Richard turned to her, his face pale, wet with tears that mixed with the rain dripping from his hair. I killed them, Maya. My sister. The others. Maya stepped closer, her voice shaking but firm. You were a child. You were trying to save them, not destroy them. Clara nodded. He made you believe you were broken so you'd never stop building for him. But now, you can stop. For a long time, no one spoke. The world outside the glass windows was calm. The storm had finally passed. Richard looked at the flash drive in his hand, then at Maya, then down at Samuel, the little boy who had unknowingly carried pieces of his past. He whispered, "This ends today." Later that night, the city's biggest news networks lit up with breaking reports. Corporate giant exposed, billionaire CEO leaks child exploitation scandal. Footage played of police raids, government officials resigning, hidden orphanage records finally revealed. The camera cut to Richard standing outside the courthouse, speaking before a crowd. His voice was calm, humble, human. I spent years building a world I thought would make me worthy of forgiveness, he said. But forgiveness isn't built. It's earned by telling the truth. Today, the truth belongs to every child who never got a chance to grow up. Maya stood beside him, Samuel clutching her hand. Clara watched from a distance, tears in her eyes, before turning and walking away into the grey morning light. Final scene. Weeks later, the orphanage grounds had been rebuilt, this time as a home for real children, funded by the same fortune that once came from their pain. Richard stood at the entrance, watching Samuel play in the garden with other kids. Maya joined him, smiling gently. He's laughing again, she said softly. Richard nodded. For the first time, I think I am too. A butterfly landed on his hand, and small, delicate, alive. He looked at it and whispered, "For you, Elena." The butterfly fluttered upward, vanishing into the golden sky as the screen slowly faded to black.